So as I said, welcome to the IAM training series. Today we're going to be covering the mobile application. This should probably be a quicker training, just because there's less to cover, and I think much of it you already know. But we are going to talk about the general functionality of the mobile application. We're going to talk extensively about syncing projects and what that means for us. And then we're just going to understand what features are available to mobile users in the mobile phone. A lot of these features you already know a lot about from previous sessions. Okay, so here is the overview for the lesson today. Should hopefully be shorter than the time we've allocated. Okay, so the basics of the mobile phone are such that currently it is Android only, so we are not supporting iOS. It can be downloaded from the Play Store by anyone, but doesn't mean anyone can log in. Obviously, you need a username with permissions to log into the phone, and you need to have access to at least one project. Otherwise, even if you have a user account with no permissions, you can log in, but you wouldn't see any projects. The app is updated pretty periodically. We don't have a set schedule, but sometimes we push out updates quickly if we've identified an issue. Generally speaking, we do make updates a few times a year, so we really recommend that you try and turn on automated updates, or at least stay abreast of when we tell you there are updates to make sure your team is updating the app. Really, every app update we make usually contains some amount of optimization, bug fixes, improvements. And it does get very confusing for us when people use different versions of the app and report problems, and some of those problems are already solved, obviously, in maybe more recent versions. So that is just a general request from us. And actually, it should always be your first troubleshooting step for any user. So if anyone is reporting an issue with their mobile application, your first question should be, have you checked the Play Store? Are you using the latest version? That would be a good first step, let's say, always. Okay, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna tell you about the different features of the app, and then I'm gonna do one big demo at the end, as opposed to trying to switch between my phone and the presentation, because that takes some time. Generally speaking, after you log in, there is like a user profile and app settings section. And there you have the availability to change some information related to your user account. So that includes like how often you're notified. That includes whether automated syncing is turned on. It allows you also to set some options related to the language of your choice and the region. So the app is translated into a few different languages, including, I believe, Arabic, French, Bangladeshi, and maybe a few others. Spanish might be there. I'm not sure, but we can add languages in. We need a willing translator to help us out. If you don't see text in the language you're choosing, it just means it hasn't been translated yet. So as we update the app, if there's new language, we then have to go through and kind of retouch all the translations. But yeah, if you do need access to a language, or you want to support the translation of a language, it's pretty easy. It doesn't take much time. You just need to contact us and we'll get that set up for you. Through this screen, you can also change the password of your user account, and then obviously you can log out. Logging out is recommended if you're going to be passing the device between different users, so not to leave your user account logged in for obvious reasons of data protection and privacy. Okay, so a lot of this training, or let's say that the hardest thing to understand in this training, is what is the sync function? Why do we have it? And basically, the sync function is there to support the sort of offline online functionality that is really important to the mobile application. So everything you can do in the mobile application, you can do offline as well as online. However, the caveat is, when you do things offline, obviously the server doesn't really know what you've done. And so there's a process called syncing, wherein the things you did offline, so the submissions, the new sites you may have added, the contacts, any changes you made offline need to then be communicated to the server. And this sort of exchange of information is really dependent on the internet and the bandwidth that you have. So we call this process syncing. And it's just basically the process in which the server and your phone are communicating and updating one another on the changes that happened when they were out of touch. Syncing is a really quite complicated technical feature, and we just want to stress that it is working, it works well, but there's just like a lot of different things that can affect this process. So we're going to kind of unpack that in detail and talk about what things you should be aware about. Generally speaking, though, when you go offline, so we mean when you go into an offline environment where you don't have internet access, things are saved to your device. And while you're offline, they only exist on the device and the device itself. So until you have synced your project, until you have submitted your saved data, if the phone is destroyed, lost, something happens to it, that data will also be lost because there's no copy anywhere else. Whereas with our server, we have backups. Even if the server was affected, we would be able to restore it. We cannot do that when you have data saved offline. And it's good practice not to leave data on the phone for any period of time. It's good to try and sync it as soon as you can. So in the phone, there's a Save Data tab, which will show you all of the things you have done offline that are stored offline, that are waiting to be uploaded to the server. So before you upload it, you still have the option to go in there and edit it. Maybe many of you are familiar with the ODK interface where, when you save an offline form, you can go in and edit it before you submit it. Once you upload it, it gets removed from the list. And then obviously, if there's some sort of error or bandwidth issue that prevents you from submitting that data would still remain on your phone in that list. So it's not until it gets confirmation that it's on the server that it kind of removes itself. Generally speaking, we've organized that tab based on the types of data that you collect through the phone. So that includes information about submission sites, contacts, and beneficiaries. It's also searchable by criteria. So if you know that you added a certain site, you can look for that and edit information up until the point where it's submitted. Obviously, with Zeit, you can still edit things like after you submit them. It's just the process is a bit slightly different. For example, when you're editing saved data, you go to the saved data section to edit it. After it's submitted, you would go through the normal process. So if you're editing a site that already exists, you make that edit as we've shown you in previous lessons. Okay, so we're going to talk about the syncing diagram and kind of break down what happens during a sync. So you have a phone, and on that phone, you can do any number of things. So you can complete tasks, you can fill out new form submissions, you can add contacts, you can even add and edit sites, and that data exists only on the phone. Syncing, as I said, on server side, we have a separate set of things happening. So on the server side, forms get updated, sites can also be obviously added on the server, right, directly. Like we've shown you how to do that. You go into your project page, you add a new site. Obviously, the users using the mobile phone might need to know that. You're also making edits to cases. You're also maybe creating tasks, whether automatically or manual. And that these two pieces of information actually relate to one another, right? The phone contains a list of forms and that you're using. And if those forms get updated, you want the phone to be updated with the most recent versions of the form. Similarly, the server side needs to be updated with everything that's happening offline. So this is what we call syncing. As I said, sounds pretty simple. Technically, it gets quite complicated. And we'll talk about why that is. This is the information in general categories that gets updated in syncing. So every time you hit sync, which is a button at the kind of in the main interface that we'll show you, this information gets updated. So project information, user roles. So, for example, if I change my user permission or the user permission of a colleague like Candace, she will continue to have, if she's using the mobile phone remembers the permission she had. And the next time she syncs, if I remove that permission, only then would she see an updated permissions list. So whether she might see more sites or less sites, depending on how I've changed the permission. With site list, site information, map views, these are all updated. Obviously adding new sites, adding information to site lists. This is all viewable in the app, but it doesn't get updated until you sync the phone. Similar with contact information, new contacts, changes to the structure of the contact forms, all of that is updated every time you sync. And then, most obviously submissions, forms, and tasks, those also get updated in the syncing process. Let's talk about, there are two types of syncing technically. There's what we call a project synced or a full sync. which will sync everything. So everything on that previous list, it goes through one by one. It says, is there a newer version of this? And if so, it will sync. There's also what's called a partial sync, where if you're really in weak internet environments and maybe one part of the sync process is failing, you can say, hey, actually for this sync, I just am trying to get the form updates. I've already synced everything else. Generally speaking, we recommend you just do a full project sync, but the partial sync is there in case you are having issues, namely with bandwidth. This would be applicable, or namely if you have like a lot of data you're syncing and you want to make it a bit faster and you know what you need to update. The application will give you a sync report, so it will tell you whether or not your sync has been successful or whether it's failed, and that's really to indicate to the user whether they need to try again. Cool. So technical details, limitations with sync. The app, generally speaking, tries to sync in the background. And this is a really key point that we do not communicate to you. The reason we don't do this is sort of like mobile application best practice. So all of us have phones. Most of those applications have some kind of persistent connection to the internet. And they're just like checking, right? So if you have like a messaging app like WhatsApp, it's checking for new messages. It's also like if it gets a new message, so it can send you a notification. Similarly with our application, we've done that to sort of streamline the experience. So when it has internet access, it may be trying to do things like sync or kind of reconcile the two data records between the server side and the phone side. This works well when there's good like mobile internet, basically. If you have really weak or patchy mobile internet, it will just cause general problems with your phone, or namely the application, because the application is trying to use basically a really small internet connection to update itself, and it just struggles. Sometimes it looks like it hangs. The solution in this case is just to turn off mobile data when you're doing this, just because then the phone is not going to try and check. Like the phone can identify when there's no internet, but when there's really, really weak or really intermittent internet, this can mess with the apps on the phone. And again, your team members probably don't have like WhatsApp and all these tools on their phone. They're probably mainly just using Zeit or other work tools. So this is, yeah, if the app looks like hanging, unresponsive, try asking the user to turn off mobile data. That may solve their problem. Again, it doesn't mean they can never turn it back on. They just turn it off if they're in these contexts where the internet is super patchy or very slow. Similarly, you can always ask them to, like, if you're struggling to sync or struggling to understand whether something was syncing, ask them to tell you about their sync history. Ask them to tell you whether there's one particular section or part of the sync process failing. And that usually can give you some indication for, why that might be occurring. Before we cover this, actually, just to kind of continue on other points, the user permissions you give someone drastically impact how much data they need to sync. So for example, if I am working in 1,000 sites and I give my mobile user permission over 1,000 sites, it means that the mobile phone then needs to download 1,000 sites worth of site list and worth of site information in order to function, which is fine if you have like good internet, basically, or even okay internet, I would say. Again, we're always really cognizant about the features we build and making sure they don't require, really intensive internet. But again, everyone around the world is using different bandwidths, different connections. And so we can't really tell you like there's going to be this ideal fit. Like the amount of data you're trying to sync is not just related to your project, but user permissions. So again, thinking about what we call right sizing user permissions is not just about data protection and sensitivity. It's also going to dictate how well or fast that mobile phone works for the user. Apologies. So yeah, again, smaller permissions means less to sync, means easier time syncing, faster syncing. Again, if people do need access to data for whatever work reasons, obviously they should, they should have access to it. You should give them permission for it. But if they don't need access to it, you are going to make their sync and their kind of general offline work faster. Yeah, more successful, more streamlined, we can say. Kind of a final thing affecting syncing is if you have one of these categories is a large amount of data. So for example, if you have 10,000 contacts, right, and the user has access to 10,000 contacts, that kind of means that when they first sync their project, they need to download 10,000 contacts. So maybe the first time it's going to take a longer time to sync. Or if, suddenly there are, 1,000 tasks that were created and assigned to the user, that means they have to download 1,000 tasks. So just being aware that kind of depending what's happening in your project, that will have knock-on effects to the syncing feature and to what your users are trying to do offline. Generally speaking, if there is decent internet, we're not even saying you need like fiber optic or broadband level. It really just means maybe like good 3G internet would be okay. Where we see struggle is when the internet is really weak and the amount of data that people are trying to sync is quite large. Okay, cool. So we're going to also talk about what's called syncing conflicts. So what happens when we have our server or computer and we have someone using a mobile phone and they complete task A offline? And then what happens when someone else, who has the same task in their task list also completes task A online? Both of them obviously go to sync their project. And the server is basically now receiving two records. In this case, let's say it's two submissions related to the task. People were asked to do a monitoring form. Two users, haven't coordinated with each other. They both do the form. They submit it to the server. What happens? There's no general rule on what happens on conflict, as we might say. So in this case, both submission records would appear next to the task with the different usernames. So this can happen basically. And there's no really way to prevent the duplication other than having those team members coordinate and communicate with each other about who's doing what. But if you have large teams, if you have large data, conflicts are going to happen. The important thing to note is that Zeit Manager is going to deal with that based on some logic. So in this case, it's just going to take both submissions. But when you extract that data, you're obviously not going to get both submissions. You may only get, if you're doing a case record, you would get both submissions. But in other instances, it maybe is only going to look at the one that came in last, technically, because no two submissions will come in at the same time. So for example, if I add a contact and then edit it, and then someone else like Candace edits it at kind of nearly the same time or a few minutes after me, it will probably take the most recent edit as the final edit. So just to be aware that that can happen if you see cases like this, probably it's that Zeit is doing something to resolve these conflicts because it needs to do one or the other. It can't do both always. Yeah, so what happens when you have slow sync speeds and what are our advice for this? So as I said, sync speed changes based on your data, changes based on your bandwidth. You really, our best advice is to be patient. So don't try and sync, a large project and expect to be able to pick up the phone and use it the next minute, right? Especially the first time you sync something is always going to be slower because it's downloading the site list for the first time. It doesn't download the site list every time. It only downloads updates the second time. So again, the first time you do things is going to be slower. And generally we recommend just be patient, get in the habit. If your team members are going out to their sites or project locations, have them sync their apps and have a team meeting while the apps are syncing so that, by the time that's done, they're ready to go and they don't have to wait for the sync to fix. We've talked about limiting user roles as much as possible. We talked about turning off auto sync and manually sync already. And then the last advice, and again, this is really when we're really dealing with bad internet, is if you have 10 team members and they're all coming back to the same office space and they all try and sync their device at the same time, they all hit sync. That basically means you're taking, 10 sets of data and you're asking it to sync against the same, capacity or bandwidth that you have. So that's bad practice. If you really have weak internet, let one team member sync, let them say, hey, I'm done, someone else can sync, and go off in rounds of one. It doesn't always need to be one, but it could be two people or small groups. This is also gentler on the server and to be clear with everyone, some people have commented sometimes the server slows down. And that's generally because of this field practice where some of our larger project locations, Bangladesh, Somalia, when the day is finished and people are coming back from the project sites, they're all hitting sync at the same time, and that's fine because let's say their internet supports it. But what it means is the server, it hasn't really received anything while people were out working. Everyone's back, and basically the server is receiving thousands, if not, thousands plural, submissions or sites or information all at once. And this is why it slows down, because it can't process everything all in one moment. Cool. Do we have any questions on syncing or how that feature works, or kind of what to do when certain things occur?
No questions so far.
Awesome. Cool. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit. We're just going to kind of move on to what you can do in the mobile application. So after you've obviously synced and you're set up to work offline, the main kind of, let's say, meat and potatoes of the application is built again around your site list that you see as a user, and you can interact with that site list in a few different ways. You can search it by name, you can group it by regions and site types. You can also go on the map that's built into the application, and you can click the site that you're trying to select on the map. And then on the individual site page, you're also able to create sites. Now, why might you want to do this? Many of you are working, let's say, in what we would call stable contexts, where we know the project locations when we start. There's not many changes to them. A good example of this would be contexts like Bangladesh, contexts like South Sudan, like Ethiopia, where the site list is changing much less. In which case, you probably don't need people creating sites to the mobile application. You can create them all in the office in one go, and then kind of make the edits that you need to make once or twice a year. No big issue. In many contexts, so contexts like Somalia, Ukraine, Gaza, we have an ongoing process of what we might call site discovery, where people are out in project locations and they are finding new IDP sites or new project locations that we want added to the list. And for this reason, users, in some cases, you have to toggle the setting on in your advanced settings for sites in your project settings. But you can toggle on the ability for users to create sites, and you can also toggle on the ability to create sites with approval, which means that users can create sites, but that will actually not be added to the list until the IAM manually approves and says, yes, this new site that was suggested by Candace, I have approved it. And in the approval process, I'm also able to edit certain information. So I could add on a proper site ID. I can add on maybe the other site information that needs to be collected with that. Cool. So yeah, that is and then kind of not only can you create a site, there's, as I said, some other information that you can view in the mobile application related to sites. So you can see the site information, site profile, data that you've associated with the site. You can also see users that have access to the site, and you can also see submissions, like I think submission counts related to that site as it's relevant. On the site page of the mobile application, which, as I said, we'll show you at the end, you will be able to see a few things. If the site has subsites, you'll be able to see and select any of those subsites. But you'll also be able to see the available forms you have to fill out, the tasks that are related to the sites, the contacts and beneficiaries. So that's all arranged in a little kind of mini site dashboard. As I said, it's not as complete as a site dashboard on the web page because you have much less space on your phone. But this is where you kind of open a site and then you do what you need to do related to that site. So it might be adding a contact, it might be filling out a form, monitoring form or referral, etc. The mobile phone also has what's called a map page. So it's on the bottom bar, as I'll show you in a moment. There you can see the configured map views. So if you remember in the earlier lesson, we showed you how you can set up map views for your project. If you set up and save a map view, that map view will be available on the mobile phone. It's not, I would say, useful universally on all projects, but it is very useful if you have a project with many sites, especially when those sites are close together, because it may be confusing to know, hey, am I in this site or that site, or which site am I closer to, or I'm trying to find this site and it's not really clear where it is. that map is kind of becomes more useful, especially if you upload it with polygonal data. So when you have like lots of sites next to each other and you're trying to figure out, hey, am I in this subblock or that subblock? The map can be quite helpful to the user because it will show their present location against where that site is located. Okay, another big aspect of the mobile application is the task list. And the task list is really key in sort of, let's say, the kind of communication from the kind of project locations to the server and the server back, because tasks are often created server side or always created server side and then sent to the mobile devices to the responsible users. So the task list is set up in such a way that tasks that are due sooner or have higher priority appear higher on the list. So if you have 2 tasks due on Friday, the one that's marked as higher priority is higher up. If you have a task due tomorrow and a task due next week, the next week one will be second on the list. So this is important in just telling your team members, actually the app is trying to do some of the lifting in terms of what you should be doing first. So you should always try and do things. If you can do everything on the task list, do things higher up on the list before you do things lower down on the list is a general good way of working. And then you also have a bunch of filters that you can use to interact with the task list. So we've listed them out here. Really, we've tried to give you every filter we can think of, because we know teams have a lot of different operational preferences in terms of how they do their work and how they divide work between team members. Okay, so this next part, I mentioned earlier that there is this case where, I go out to the project location to do something, and so does Candace, and we both complete the same task because maybe we didn't talk to each other about who was going to do it. Candace arrives, at 9, I arrive 3 hours later trying to do the same task. As I said, for a Zeit, that doesn't really create data management problems too much, and that it'll just keep both records. But obviously, that's not very efficient. That's like a waste of our time. That can get confusing. Obviously, if we have to ask some questions to people, they may be annoyed if, that we're asking them twice to kind of go through the same process. So we've also tried to build in this ability to organize and coordinate tasks, so you can star a task. And what that does is that will pin it to the top of your task list. So the morning, if Candace and I are working in a site and we see we have 10 tasks to complete, I can pin 5 tasks to mine and she could pin 5 tasks to her. And then that way the task list is divided and I know what I've been assigned to me and she knows what she's been assigned to her. And obviously that works more and more at scale. This gets important if you have big sites or sites where you have lots of users working and lots of tasks, because this coordination becomes more and more important in terms of making sure you're not duplicating. We also recommend doing things like creating some logic. So we could also say hey, Candace and I are both in charge of referrals. I want Candace to respond to or follow up about all the food and livelihood referrals, and I'm going to do all the shelter NFI referrals. That would be another good way of doing it. In that case, you don't need to do the pinning. She could use filters, I could use filter, and there's a clear separation of who does what. Again, this is kind of best practice. The app doesn't force you to do any of this, and will deal with any problems technically that might be caused by duplication. But yeah, this is just how we suggest you manage kind of these issues in field. And we will also say that, just to note that if I've done a task, Candace will see that task until I've synced my device and she synced her device. So I would need to sync my device. That would mark on the server the task has been completed. And then the next time Candace syncs, she would see the task marked as completed, and it would be removed from her list, just so you have some idea of the sequencing and how the list gets updated. So as I said, if everyone is syncing at the end of the day, that's great. But it's also good to sync in the morning because, as I said, depending on when people's syncs have finished, their task lists might be kind of different or incomplete. So once in the morning, once at the end of the day is ideal if you can manage that. Most of the tasks in the task list, as I said, we've gone through the different task types. You have general tasks. A lot of them are going to be what's called follow-up tasks or submit a form. And in these tasks, you have the ability to see some information about the case. So this is just for you to know that the mobile phone doesn't just show you like site information, it also actually shows you a lot of information related to the case and the case history. So in our referral process, if you remember, we have like a referral opening form and we have a kind of completion report. And when I get the follow-up task for the completion report, I'll be able to review information about the case. So I'll be able to see the reason, I'll be able to see the comment history, the case history, and other information associated there. And that's really useful in knowing like what's happened to that case after it was submitted. That's how we manage referrals, but that's also how we kind of manage any sort of multi-step process where information needs to get added somewhere in the office and then go back to the field teams or project locations. Users can also, just so you're aware, create tasks for themselves in their mobile phone. It's again, not required, but if you want to use the task list that way, I can add tasks for myself. So maybe we have a team meeting and Candace asks me to check the fire extinguishers when I go visit a certain site. In that case, I can add that task for myself and it will be added there. The rule is, though, that users can only create one task type, which is general, and I think also submit, but they can only assign these to themselves. So they can't actually use the phone to assign work to other people, but they can use the app to kind of keep track of their own task lists. Okay, so now it's actually demo time, which is great. And hopefully this should be pretty quick. I think a lot of people have seen the application and are familiar with it. So we can see my phone screen. So I am currently logged in with my main account. So you'll see if you're a part of multiple projects, you would see a complete list of every project you're part of. We're going to be working on the IM training series. And the first time I hit this, it'll say, okay, if you're moving into that project, you need to sync. And so I can push sync project. And I have really good internet where I am, so I'm going to be able to sync quite quickly. But you'll see here on this screen, this is sort of the sync report. This is the categories of things that are syncing. It's closed because it actually finished. But you'll see, as I said, if I only wanted to sync one aspect, if I wanted to only sync my site list, I can just push that one button. It's actually finishing very quickly, so it's not going to show you. If I wanted to sync everything, I could push that sync now button at the bottom. If I want to see the history, I can press sync history, and you'll see I can go into each of these and see the status of what has successfully synced. And if anything has failed, it would give me a red X. I can't actually go offline on the phone and share my screen. So yeah, this is, unfortunately, I can't really demo some of the failure. To go into my user settings, I just push my profile photo on the top and I can hit account settings. And you'll see I have options for when it loads. There we go. Sorry, it's a bit slow. But you can see I have options for notifications, sync. Here, you'll see that there's options for auto syncing. We recommend only using these. Second. It's loading very slowly. Yeah, great. So here are the auto sync settings. We recommend only turning these on if you're really confident in the internet. We initially had them all on by default, but we found that most of our users and country partners don't have like good enough internet to support this. But if for some reason you feel like you do have really good internet, you can turn these on. What it means is that your phone is going to try and kind of continuously sync stuff throughout the day when it feels like it has good internet, similar to like WhatsApp sending and receiving messages without you needing to like push send a message, right? Or sync messages. Okay, we also have here language and reason, just to show you if you want to change the default language over the phone, you can do so on this interface. Here are the languages that we have supported. Yeah, and as I said, we can always add more as needed, but we just need your help with translation. Okay, going back to the main interface, you'll see that for the IM training, we have these 84 sites. We see that I can also, search the sites for larger site lists, and it will filter. I can also do things like organize by region. So I think all of these sites are in a region called Asia. It may take a moment, depending on how like big or small your site list is. But you can see that we have these regions configured in the project. we can also search by site type. So here I have 3 different organizations worth of sites in my list. Cool. You can also see by the triple dot always means options. So for example, I can see the site information related to this. We don't really have much site info for this project, but you'll see the basic counts. You'll also be able to see a small map of the location. You also see, as I said, users. This is the user list. We don't have users assigned specifically to this site, so it's showing none. And you'll also be able to see a record of submissions related to the site. So this is quite useful. As I said, if you remember, hey, was this done, I don't know, last week, you can actually just check the submission history for the site. Okay, so we're going to go into one of our sites, and you'll see here, as I said, when there are subsites configured, you have the option to also like select into the subsite. And it's the same interface. It just allows you to kind of drill down to the correct level. So again, many times you can fill out a form as part of the parent site, or you could also do it as the subsite or child site. In our main, let's say Andijan site, you'll see the forms button. This allows me to open the forms I want to fill out. So if I push that, I will see the 3 forms I have associated with the project. Sorry, for some reason, Teams is very slow in updating this. So yeah, here are my forms. And I can open a form just by clicking any one of these. And this will open the ODK form in my phone. You'll see this message getting form information or sometimes getting location information. So as I said, Zeit will record the user's location when they fill out forms. So that's what it's doing. If you see it hanging on that screen, sometimes that means that the GIS signal might be a bit weak. You can also see here, this is the form itself. This is the basic Kobo ODK interface. I can save the form as later, as you can see. I can keep editing, or I can discard if I want to exit out. I'm going to discard this because I don't need it. Below, you'll see the tasks associated with the site. We're not going to interact with the task list here. And you'll also see the contacts that Harris added earlier in the training. So we have these test contacts. If I want to add a subsite, a task, or a contact, I can just click in here. I can add a new contact, right? And fill out the form as we had previously set up. Cool. All of that information that I do offline is going to go into this Save tab. So the Save tab is here, and you'll notice these tabs at the top allow us to key into or find different saved records from different parts of the application. I didn't fill out anything on this training, but if I did, it would be available here, and you could edit and open it and kind of change the information as you want before you actually submit. So maybe sometimes your users want to review the information they've collected at the end of the day, edit it, and then do the upload. My task list is here, and you'll see we don't have too many tasks. I did create some tasks so we could see some for this training. Sorry, it's not actually this slow to load on my phone. It's just the Teams interface for some reason is very slow to update. So yeah, we have 4 tasks here, and you'll see that when I click a task, I can see the information associated with the task. I can see the comments related to the task. I can click the task or the task history button shows us at the bottom. I can kind of say, I can't do this until, Wednesday, for example, if I'm, trying to communicate about what's being done. Yeah, and if I have access, I believe I can edit the task, but this is something a normal, like if someone is only assigned a mobile user role, they're not going to be able to do this. But they could get the link, for example. So if they're saying, hey, boss, is this important for me to do this week? They can always copy the link, send that link over WhatsApp, for example, to their boss to ask a question about it. They can also mark the task status. So for example, some tasks maybe take multiple days to complete. They could always say, hey, this is in progress. And lastly, you'll see this starred button, right? This is that feature that I told you allows me to pin the task to the top of my list. So I know this task is assigned to me as opposed to another colleague like Candace. Okay, and then below we have these follow-up tasks, right? These tasks require us to submit an additional form, right? A completion report. And so here's the task information. and you'll see that I can actually see the case history here. So a referral has come in, and you'll see here that it's been marked as resolved. It seems that I said, hey, this is going to be arranged the following week. So what I need to do is I need to speak to this person, just let them know they're going to receive their, I believe it's an NFI kit. If I've forgotten for whatever reason, I can click case summary, and it'll show me the actual summary information. So yes, it was indeed a referral for kitchen items for the entire site on the 9th of March, yesterday. So I need to tell the person that we're going to arrange for the delivery next week. Yeah, so to complete this, I can also see the full submission details. Yeah. Cool. Check. Yeah, cool. Awesome. So this is the task list. And as I said, if you wanted to create tasks, you can also do that for yourself. Yeah, general and submit are supported. And then lastly, the filters I mentioned, if you push the filter icon, you'll see that you can filter by a huge range of criteria. Awesome. And then last but not least, we have this mapping feature, which is going to show me in Poland, where I currently am based, I believe. Yeah, it should be in Poland. Maybe not. Yeah, so here I am in Warsaw, but actually it's more useful, obviously, if I'm buying my project sites. Harris and I, when we set up this project, we set up our sites all over Asia. So in this case, the map is probably not very useful. But oftentimes it's a case that, right, if you're working in like a city, for example, or an informal settlement, can be quite useful once you're trying to understand the boundaries of a given site. Maybe as a final note on this, you can actually turn off the mapping feature if for sensitivity reasons that needs to be turned off. And you'll see here the map views that Harris considered. You know, he made an inactive site view. He also made like an active site view. And this will show me the sites on the map that meet that filterable criteria. So that's actually it for today. The mobile phone, I mean, the training about the mobile phone is not, I would say, too difficult. What we recommend when you onboard new users is always to give them an orientation to the mobile phone. Generally speaking, depending on what someone's doing, the mobile phone is not, I would say, particularly difficult to use. But if you're going to use the mobile phone as this comprehensive tool where people are going to need to be adding context, doing tasks, managing, you know, doing submissions, they're probably going to need a more robust explanation. This is why often when we get started, we recommend starting with like one process or one activity in Zeit, because it's much easier to learn like how to do one thing in the phone instead of trying to learn 7 things at once. So once people get kind of generally comfortable with the phone, get comfortable with syncing, they're then able to add on other functions quite easily. We will always recommend that you include an explanation of the syncing and the sync process to people who use the phone, because we find that that generally is where most of the problems we encounter lie. And to be quite honest, a lot of the problems we encounter are, you know, a combination of really weak internet related problems and or people using really old devices. So just keep in mind when we're communicating about mobile phones that the kind of technical challenges are much more complex, just because we have phone hardware that can create problems. We have internet infrastructure that can create problems. Neither of those are fully in our control. And then we have the application as the third piece. So usually when we're trying to understand what's happening in the mobile phone, we need to understand a little bit about each of those 3 things. Generally speaking, most of the issues you may encounter are just simply users are not seeing their site lists or seeing something they should be seeing. Generally speaking, you should always just tell them, update their app, fully sync their project. Then if they're still not seeing what they're supposed to be seeing, that's when we start investigating and saying, you know, are user permissions applied correctly, or is there something else happening? So that's it for mobile phones. Is there any questions before we wrap up today?